Computer. Okay, we are live. We are live. All right, welcome, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Just Pain webinar series. This time we have a very special guest, Georgie Smallwood. Well, Georgie, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for accepting this. I know that your schedule might be pretty busy, although we are, in an environment that we are not changing so much. We are, always in the same place. But yeah. I know that it's challenging for a person like you, that you have so many meetings, so many, scheduled. So thank you so much for taking this time to have a chat with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. So for those who are on the webinar, folks, I'm just going to be a little bit of housekeeping here. If you have any questions during the webinar, please put it on the chat box. I'll do my best to collect them and try to keep the story or the thread during the conversation. But if you want to ask something to Georgie, please put it on the chat box. And the idea is like to try to, typical Q&A and a little bit going further on how is the role of the CPO, especially in this timing confusing where the turmoil seems to be like the new normal, at least for in the last couple of months. So that is how we're going to do it. I just want to start, Georgie, trying to go a little bit of your background. If you want to give a quick introduction to the folks on the audience, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in technology or digital product for about 10 or 12 years. I started my career, actually, I always wanted to be a journalist. I really like telling stories, and I managed to get a job as a cadet reporter on a small newspaper in Melbourne before I got told that potentially that wasn't really my calling. There was too much editing that needed to be done to my narrative stories. And I moved across the hall in the organization to the advertising side. And what I really liked about advertising is that it is also another form of storytelling. So you certainly want an outcome from advertising. You want the audience to get something from it. And you need to create that narrative that is valuable to them so that they see the value in what you're giving. I worked in a number of different tech companies. I was very fortunate to early in my career work at a company called realestate.com.au, which was a small company in Australia. Well, not small, there were about 400 people, but they boomed in the 5 years that I was there. Totally not just because I was there, but we grew really, really fast. I mean, they were worth $500 million when I joined, and they were a publicly listed company because there's not as much venture money in Australia as there is in Europe and America. And in 5 years, they were worth $5.5 billion. And so it really did explode. And what I learned in that environment was kind of how to be flexible and problem solve. And we just kind of kept solving the next problem. And I'm not sure I got an official promotion at any point in that, but I just kept kind of solving more problems. And that was really exciting. And I had a fantastic team around me. I had an amazing boss. And that kind of, I guess, made me start to love that hypergrowth environment where you're constantly moving and the problems are being thrown at you and they seem insurmountable, and then together you can solve them. And I get a real kick out of that environment. So I've kind of stayed there for most of my career. And then I moved around the world. So I worked in Hong Kong. I've worked in Germany twice. I never thought I would say that. I did an IPO for a tech company called Scout when I was here a couple of years ago. And then I kind of fell in love with software when I went back to Australia and started working at Xero. And then N26 gave me a call.
Nice. So I'm gonna ask for the people who are on the call if they can mute themselves. That would be awesome. So we don't hear any background noise. Otherwise, I'll have to mute them myself. Okay. Now I think there we are good. We are back in business. Okay.
Did me though.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Nice. Nice. All right.
Awesome.
We are back in business. So, Georgie, the fascinating thing about that is that you have been like, jumping between different kind of companies. So you mentioned that you were in Scout. You were also in a B2B company. What is the difference between those kind of companies and now being like, in like a bank where you need to be more careful specifically, about different stuff because you are, I don't want to say playing, but you are managing people's money, right? Which one of the things that people also, care about. So how is it different between, being in that kind of situation, for example, in the other companies that you used to play the role in product?
Yeah. So the differences in any company that you go to is always going to be the user and the constraints that the company is operating in.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to know those. You can stay in the same user kind of your whole career, and that can be incredibly successful. I didn't do that. So every time when I went to Xero, I very quickly realized that I didn't understand what double entry accounting was. It's really failing on my schooling.
Happens.
And I did a kind of a 6-week evening bookkeeping course because, this was the reality of the accountants. We had double-sided marketplace essentially with Xero. You've got accountants and small businesses. And you really do need to understand the problems and the challenges that your consumer or customer is facing.
Right.
So that is different. So there's a consumer side to N26, but also financial problems for consumers is a very specific type of consumer, because you can be talking to a user and what they think about Spotify and what they think about their bank. You could feel like you're talking to two completely different people. Because people are okay to push the boundaries and innovate and test and learn and experiment in something that's kind of cool, like music and video streaming. And when they're putting their money with you, they're less okay with testing and learning. So but at the same time, you need to adopt that mindset and those lean principles and, human-centered design thinking and all of that stuff that really make companies like Google and Netflix and Instagram and Spotify boom. You need those practices, because otherwise we won't stay there, right? We won't keep up. So you need to find a way to understand what those constraints are with which you can put those things into. And in banking, those in lots of companies, the constraints are there. You might need to look a bit harder for them. In banking, they're black and white.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're generally written down in a document, which is about 3,000 pages long. And
that no one reads.
Yeah, it's like the worst T's and C's you've ever got in your life.
That's true.
But you need to understand them. And I think that is key. You need to really understand the constraints that you're dealing with and understand the premise behind them as well, because banking regulations are essentially just consumer protection. And I think there's a responsibility for companies like N26 who want to push the boundary as far as financial management is concerned and make it easier to understand and more accessible and help people to feel more confident of their finances. We also need to show and prove to regulators that we are on the same page. We also have a very, just as strong interest in consumer protection as they do. But have you considered that we could do consumer protection this way? Yeah,
exactly. Changing the game, just to put it this way.
We can use lots of different tools now, and actually make that safety a lot more seamless, a lot less anxiety driving than it has been in the past. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you mentioned users and constraint. I want to touch a bit on another, I would say, variable that for me is very important, which is the people that you're working with or your team. I just want to mention, because I took this quote from Melissa Perry's keynote on the Minded Product in Manchester, and you said that the role of the CPO is essentially the same as being a product manager, but you are at the intersection of the users and business, but the stakes are much higher. So we normally understand that, like any product manager, when you go to product and say, yeah, we are working like a, the typical triad with the, having the engineering side, design on the other thing, product management on the other one. So that is the typical triad or team when you're talking about a PM. But what is your triad, or what is your team that you are, working with in order to do these kind of things that you were mentioning before?
Yeah, so I think that I very much agree with you that the trio of design, engineering, and product is essential, right? And it's a bit like, I call them the builder's business, right? And it's like any building site, if you need to be working from the same plans, otherwise the building won't get built. What was surprising to me, moving into the CPO role, was that I wasn't surrounded by product people anymore. So those conversations that I would be having with my peers before, where we would be talking about experiments and testing and learning and some crazy idea that we wanted to break down into something else. All of a sudden, my peers were the executive team. And that's the different environment as well. And there are different stakeholders in that. So I have, obviously the CTO is, glued to my side. The CPO and the CTO need to be completely on the same page and singing the same tune. I think that the other parts that are really important is the marketing and the growth side of the business for me, because from a consumer perspective, there's no difference from the outside, from the billboard that you see through to the website, through to the sign up, through to the product, through to the customer support. That's the product. And I think this is always the hard thing when you have, especially with the move to product-led businesses, when there's a team that's called product, that can be quite confusing, because a product-led business is led by the product. It's not the product team are leading the organization. And so that's one of the things that I've kind of been bringing to the executive team, is that we are the product. The COO, the CS side of the organization, the data that we're getting that pushes things back, the lifecycle emails that we're sending, all of that from a consumer perspective is the product. So those stakeholders at the executive team, I had to rethink what I thought about product peers, and they are product peers. They're just experts in different parts of the product.
I mean, I just, as you were talking and mentioning a lot of things, I was thinking in different aspects. I mean, the first one is how, because normally when you say the word experiment in like a C level, people start to freaking out a little bit. So I love the idea from John Cattell that, he wanted to try to call them bets in order to, try the people to understand what we're talking about, and not having this idea that, all right, just do whatever you want, do whatever testing you want with my money, and, let's see if it works or not, right? So I think that
never happens.
Exactly. No, but the way you frame your language, I think, as you were saying, although you can use the same language, maybe at the team or the PM level, but I think that the way you frame the message, it's a little bit different. I like the idea that you mentioned of the concept behind product-led. I had interaction with Christina Woodkill last Monday. We had her. We were talking about the OKRs and this kind of thing, and we went to the same concept of product-led, which normally people misunderstand that, the product is the team that is driving the whole organization, which is completely not the idea. So ideally we are, delivering something, but all the people that are in charge of that thing, become the best. And I think that it also ties to the concept of coherence. So if I see, for example, the variable, and you are transmitting, for example, a message which is completely different than the one that we're having, inside the organization, things are not going to, are not going to match. There will be this kind of, this balance or disparity between the things that you were saying and then how you behave within the organization.
So and that can happen. right?
Exactly.
Depending on the point in time, we have fantastic branding. We have a brilliant design team. I think the way that we talk about our product in the market is fantastic. We're leaning more into the product side of it now, whereas we were very historically very brand with our big campaigns around #NoBullshit. And those were very kind of emotive, identifiable things for people to say, yeah, I'm that kind of person. And we are very much kind of leveraging that now and shifting into the product side for the actual value of the product that people are finding. And kind of, I agree what you said with the product led. Product led is the product, and the product needs to be giving value to the user.
Exactly.
So you need to understand the problems that your product is solving. Now, no one can solve every problem. So you also need to understand what problems, so what users are you going to service, and what problems are you going to solve for that user, and you need to solve them bloody well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So they choose you and not the other product that might do more, same thing or similar things to what you're doing.
Yeah, and you need to have a point of differentiation, right? Because people are going to have other products.
Exactly.
What you need to know is why people pick you, and that you can kind of defend that position and know that you are the best at doing that.
Exactly.
And that is ongoing.
Yeah, it's continuous, right? It's something that you need to do every single day. I mean, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that when you were saying in that the stakes are higher in your position, I mean, is that because you need to have this sense of what are the problems that you need to give people to solve, and try to keep them, laser focused on those, because you think that, or the whole C-level thing, that are the problems that are gonna give us to what we are going to, to achieve our vision. Is that what you're saying, that the stake is higher? Because if you like make a mistake, or give people problems that are not valuable, that the problems that the users have right now, you're like losing the sense of what are you what you're supposed to do, right?
You sort of. I mean, I don't really want to be the person that is the one that is identifying all the problems. I think that's a product manager's bread and butter, right? Understanding who their user is and knowing them well enough to understand that these are big problems that need to be solved. I think when I said that a CPO is, it's the same role, I use all the same tools that I used as a product manager to use them as a CPO. So the product for me changed. The product is the team. But I use all the same things. I need to understand what success looks like. I need to understand what metrics are going to show me if I'm moving towards success, or what I'm doing is not having an impact. And I think that those metrics are the things that show me that the stakes are higher, because the metrics that I'm measured on have huge implications, not only for the product, but also for the members of the team, and also the success and viability of the business. Right. So that's kind of what I meant by the stakes are higher, because I do believe in iterative or outcome driven development. I need to know where I'm going. I'm going to make mistakes. I also just have to be okay that sometimes those mistakes are going to cost quite a lot. I need to keep that in mind, make sure that it needs to be a mistake that I'm okay with, or that I can recover quickly from, or that I have enough people around me who say, hey, you're about to make a mistake. We need to do it this way, not that way. Got it.
Yeah, so it's not telling people what to do, but it's have clearly what are the things that we're solving, how are we measuring success, and how we're going to know that we are going to achieve, for example, what we want to.
And I think that's kind of like the gold star, right? Yeah. If you can have real clarity around the vision, but more essentially that you can have a great vision and not go anywhere, which, to hands up, like at times we get there, right? We're like, yes, we're all on board. We're excited about changing finance for the next generation. We're going to empower people. It's going to be fantastic. how exactly are we doing that right now? And absolutely, there are times when we're moving so fast that we're finishing one and we don't have others. Other times there's no excuse, right? It's such a fast moving experience. I think my major focus at the moment is making sure that we have a very clear strategic intent framework so that people can own those things. Because that's the executive's responsibility, right? To create the environment within which people can have autonomy and decision-making power. Without creating that framework, you can have autonomy, but one might be autonomy that's going this way and one that's going this way. And in these hypergrowth environments, that's a reality of day to day, and trying to make sure that everyone has clarity is something that I think about all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I love what you said about, culture. Normally they say like culture eats a strategy for breakfast, but without a strategy, we're having a hobby rather than a business, right? So exactly. I like to say that difference. Yeah, of course, culture is important, how you empower teams, but if we don't have, I would say the engine that those people are able to actionate or think that the teams are able to do, we are, like a miss of, nothing. I mean, I just want to try to take something that you just said. So when you landed into this new role and this company, what are the first things that you looked at in order to say, all right, it's a typical thing. You get to a place, everything is, normally everything is different compared to your previous company culture, the way that things are doing, different things. What, how was your experience in that, and what were the first things that you looked at when you say, all right, this is, how are we going to make this work, right? I want to create, for example, like a culture where people are able to, for example, to propose different things, or they are able to create a safe environment where they can try different things. What were those steps that you have taken to, to achieve that? And I think that you haven't reached, the status you would like to. You are always working on it. But 2 or 3 things that you say, all right, this is, I believe, is the way that we should work, and how I'm going to make this happen.
Yeah. So when I got to N26 in the middle of 2018, there was about 9 or 10 product owners. And I mean, I joined for the ambition of the company. So, 100 million users, changing finance for a generation. I mean, we all have anxiety around financial position. And I think that's something that I could really get behind. But we weren't going to get there with 8 product managers or product owners as they were. And I think the thing that surprised me when I got here was in Australia, product owner and product manager are slightly interchangeable as a terminology. Understanding that there's a Scrum product ownership, but really, like, there was a bit of a mix of the terminology, but this was very much Scrum product ownership, right? And backlogs and acceptance criteria. And it was still a very founder-led startup organization. And I think that one of the things that I changed or identified first was that we couldn't scale that, right? There wasn't enough time in the day to be having half-day meetings once a week to work out what we were going to build in the next set of sprints. And so I really started to kind of decentralize that. I also introduced planning as a cycle concept, because we had a bank, we have operations, there's lots of different parts of a bank that need to be involved, and we need to make sure that the product planning process is transparent and people have clarity about what's being worked on. That was the first thing I introduced. Also, with the team that was in place, we pulled everything into a tool. We were using Asana at the time. We've since upgraded into Jira, Confluence, and things like that. But really, I did a lot of that more structural work in the first part to make sure that there was more clarity on the work, and that I communicate with the rest of the organization on what it is that we were building, why we were building it, and what we expected the outcomes to be.
Right.
Since then, I mean, those processes have broken and been rebuilt multiple times over. We're at a size now where our quarterly planning is cumbersome. And it takes a lot of administration and time. And, you know, if it takes 2 weeks to do quarterly planning in a quarter, like that's quite a lot of time for a product manager. So now we're doing some experimentation around continuous planning. And that's being driven by the product leaders and the engineering leaders. And so we iterate on those things. So it's nice to see that those processes are growing and maturing as the company gets bigger. I think that the other part was that I really wanted the organization to be product led, but I also needed to explain what I meant by that to the organization, because I didn't to start with, and that was a mistake. I didn't realize the way people were hearing things. The other part about working in a company that is as international as N26 is, we have 85 different nationalities in our company, is that communication is like the pivotal pin that either breaks or makes things. And you have to be really, really aware of how people hear what you're saying, because you can think, and I'm quite an impatient person. I want to get I'm like, oh, come on, I've already got this. I'm running already. Like, keep up, let's go. Which can be challenging in an environment where people's languages are very different. Even though we are English as a company, that doesn't mean culturally people are understanding what it is that you mean. So that was something that I really had to stop and think about as well. When I was trying to communicate where we wanted to go, I had to make sure that everyone was hearing the same thing.
Right, that you were communicating the same message to all of people, and people understood it properly.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So you mentioned, you know, you tried to sort at the beginning the problem of scaling. You knew that with that amount of people, you weren't able to reach that, you know, ambition that, you know, drove you to join the company. You talk about clarity, and I think that clarity is also related to how you communicate things. Expectations at some extent, or where you were expecting from people to do A, B, C, or maybe try to say, I'm going to give you this, or you give me that. I mean,
I think more it was, this is what we're not going to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I think this is an ongoing part, right? And we've been good at it during some periods and not as good at it during others. The expectations, that's also part of the planning. So to get the organization, including the builders side of the business, to understand our capacity and what we can do and how we estimate, and also to be able to break work down into pieces. So this is part of understanding also your business and what is important to your business, and thinking as a product manager, how you slice that story map will depend on the situation that the company is in, or the type of company that you belong to. And you need to kind of understand what those different slices are. And it's not always as simple as, are we building to learn? Or are we building to earn? Like I honestly wish it was. But sometimes it's, we need something now. Well, that's not remotely possible. Well, actually, sometimes it is. Like if you proxy a partner in, if you use an API integration, but then you have to be really clear about what the cost of that is. So the cost might be user experience. It might be tech debt. It might be, you know, all of these things. And you need to have that documented so that you can be really clear. We can do these things. This is the cost of each of those options, and this is the benefit of each of those options.
Yeah, to some extent, you will need to make some trade-off, right? That is, you know, product management is all about. I mean, but then the problem is that when you make those trade-off, you are sure about what are the opportunity costs, what are the things that you are not doing because you think that, or you believe that the things you are doing now is going to give you more what you're expecting, right?
Absolutely. And this is where data is so important.
Yeah.
Because you need that data to be able to have that conversation.
Exactly. Exactly.
Without it, it's just
Guess.
it's just gut feel, right?
Yeah.
Which, you know, sometimes you can nail it with gut feel,
Exactly.
but it's a risky game.
Exactly. Yeah, their stakes are also very high. Yeah, absolutely. So at that point, you're saying that you need to scale the things. So as a consequence, you need to hire more people. So I always, intriguing me. What are the things that, for example, in your case, when you are interviewing a person that might potentially become a product manager, what are the things that you're looking for on those people? To say, yeah, I mean, to be
So
a
I think I
okay.
think it also, again, like, it changed at N26 compared to other companies.
Yeah.
So there's some basic fundamentals. I always look for curiosity. So a questioning mindset, wanting to know about things. I really like people who have tried things.
Mm-hmm.
So, I meet people at lots of meetups who ask me, how do I get into product management? I'm a BA, or I'm, a financial analyst, and I really want to get into product. I'm like, so just be a product manager, find something, you think about it on the side. The principles of product management are, maybe nerdy, but life principles. How do you collect information? What are you looking to achieve? And I actually hired someone about a year ago who wasn't a product manager. I think they had been for about 3 months as an intern somewhere else. And they brought a case study, which was for something from their private life. Right? They were like, this is what I want to achieve. I think it was learning a language. And they were like, I broke it down into these are the things. I do it this amount a day. And I think that proactivity and that curiosity to learn are really, really important. Right. When I got to N26, and part of the reason I joined when I joined as a director was that they were very much identified as a tech company. And I think one of the things that surprised me when I got here was, it shouldn't have, but it did, was the realization that we were a bank. And I remember the first incident that I was involved in was, there was a challenge and someone's savings were stuck in a service. That is, you don't wait till the next day to fix that bug.
Absolutely not.
Because we're not dealing with a playlist, and we're not dealing with Instagram feed. We're dealing with serious stuff. And so one of the things that I was very passionate about doing was bringing financial backgrounds and banking backgrounds into the product organization. Right. So I do look for people who have worked in environments that have strong regulations or really high constraints. Right. I think that N26 is an insane melting pot of hypergrowth, regulation, and speed, right? And if you have to learn all three things, then that's not possible for people. You can't process that amount of change if you also have to learn how to operate in a regulated environment, how to operate at speed, and how to, the teams change all the time. You've got engineers coming on board, you're constantly onboarding, these are all things that you need to learn. So I try and, from product manager upwards, I try to find people who have some experience in one aspect of that. So it might be that they were at Spotify, but then they've got the hypergrowth part. But I need to then couple that person with someone who has a really strong experience in a regulated environment, whether that's insurance or health or finance. But I very much believe in putting different skill sets together so that you can have a complementary team.
Exactly. So that's what we always talk about, the multidisciplinary teams where you have different backgrounds. It's very difficult to try to find one person who has everything. I think that person is, the weird unicorns out there, but they're probably working for, Google or whatever.
NASA.
NASA. So this kind of, But so now you need the people, you hire the people. Now, how do we help them to work together, right? Because you might have, as you were saying, you might have the person, who understands hypergrowth. You might have the person who knows about all the, problems that the banks, regulations, and you have the super outcome focused person. So now that you need to put, these people to work together, is there anything in particular that you do, or basically, how do you help? I will put it this way: how do you help these people to create an environment where they need to achieve, as you were saying, outcomes, or work like at their best, at their possibilities?
I think there's diversity is really, really important, but I think I said once in a talk, a bucket full of diversity does not make a high performing team. It just, creates a mess, nice. To be honest. And, inclusion is the only essential ingredient to ensuring that diversity is something that propels the company forward. And inclusion is very difficult. And it's something that you have to work on all the time. You also have to show it from the top.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that is really important to me is that you need to walk the talk. So it's very easy to talk about leadership things. It's very easy to talk about diversity, inclusion, about outcome driven, and walking it is just very, very hard all the time. And sometimes you'll be walking one path better than you're walking others. And sometimes you'll make mistakes, but you also need to be open and transparent about that. Like, I think one of the things that I felt when I became the CPO was the pressure to get everything right all the time. And, everyone is human. And I think that we need to make sure that the intent, I only want to work for people that have the right intent. And so people should know what my intent is, and I like to be open about the intent. I also like to get feedback on whether my intent is coming through, right? Yeah. Because sometimes I think there are many skills that you need to be a great leader, right? Yeah. You need to be empathetic. You need to be able to listen to things. You need to be patient. On the flip side of that, you also need strength, drive, and creativity.
Of course.
Now, no one can do all of those things at once. So you can learn those skills, and that's all the diversity part. But then you need to know when to flex into those skills at what point in time. And sometimes you make a mistake. You go strong when you should go empathetic. You just need to be open to being given that feedback and adjust based on the feedback. And that's a mutual respect thing that you need to build with teams and people.
It's very, every single time that I hear these kind of words, just saying, because it sounds easy when you're saying give feedback, react on the feedback, try to process that, try to make a small, very little change towards that, just try to see whether it works or not. But I mean, why do you think it's so hard? I mean, I'm pretty sure that it happens to, it happens. I mean, oh yeah, that person, gave me some feedback. I'm going to try to make it, but I did 2 minutes after that, I'm doing another thing, switching context, very, very quickly. So I'm not able to respond to that. Sometimes we disregard the importance of the feedback and how that, can impact, for example, what we are doing, or how we're, the things that we are doing, for example, with other people. How do you make sure, for example, in this case, well, yourself also and the people, create that culture of, I would say, continuous feedback to try to improve, because it's also helping to, to improve or make progress. How do you ensure that? Or is there any particular thing that you communicate? You, for example, set up some kind of sessions, meetings, or whatever to reinforce that?
Yeah, so I think there's lots of things, and a lot of companies have those things in place, right? We do 360 feedbacks at least quarterly. We have skip level conversations in certain parts of the organization. I think I'm fairly open as far as conversations are concerned. I believe that AMAs should be done on the fly. I don't believe in Q&As. I encourage people to ask me any question in an open forum. I also will be completely honest if I can't answer that question or I don't have an answer, because it has to go both ways.
Right.
All right. That transparency in that respect, I respect my team. I respect that their question is going to be valid because they're worried about it or they are looking for an answer. And the respect goes the other way. They need to respect that I will give them the answer that I can. But I also I sound like Mary Poppins. I also stuff it up all the time. And like you said, you get feedback and then you go into another meeting and you forgot to write it down, or, your intent is to listen all the time, but there is a lot to do and you can't listen all the time. So you also need to make sure that you circle back on things and you say, hey, I forgot to do this, but I didn't forget what you said. And I'm now going to go and do those things. That's okay. You can be late. You just can't ignore. Exactly.
Which is even worse.
Who wants to work for someone that's ignoring you?
Exactly. I just want to take a pause, Georgie, to try to encourage people who are on the call. If they want to ask questions, please feel free. You were mentioning a lot of things regarding, communication, coherence, transmitting the same message. Has that at some extent, changed based on the situation that we're facing right now? I know that for you, that you're an international company, you are used to, having conversations, people that are distributed, even that they're distributed in different regions that might be also dispersed because, people in the same office in Barcelona can work, for example, from home. So there's a lot of ways to put that. But how for example, your communication has changed now that you're going remote? Have you adopted any particular things to try to avoid, losing this kind of communication that you might have when you are at the office, or more or less for you has been the same at some extent?
No, it hasn't been the same. I think a year and a half ago, N26 existed in one building in Berlin. And now we're in Barcelona, Vienna, New York, and we have business offices in lots of capital cities in the world. I think from a product and tech perspective, we have a big hub in Barcelona. We're building small and tight team in Vienna. We have engineers and product people in New York as well. I think what the coronavirus situation taught us, to be honest, in Berlin, is what it was like for the people in the other offices. And there are things that I would like to adopt permanently that we've learned from this situation. I think all hands, for instance, when you do an all hands and the leaders and the majority of the people are in Berlin and everyone else is dialing in, just by its very nature, it becomes focused on the Berlin world of it. Whereas I think that when everyone is dialing in, there is a uniformity to it and everyone has the same voice. I think that's really important. I'd like to keep that. I also think that, we weren't that flexible. We had different situations. If people came to their manager or to me and said, look, I've got this situation, I'd like to, set up something a little bit more flexible, then obviously we were open to doing that. But we didn't have any kind of large scale remote working or this is how we do things. And I hope that what this has done for the organization is to show that we can be very efficient, very productive working from home. And that's difficult in startups because, it's very tight and everyone's together and you rely very much on being in the one place. And this certainly would never have been an experiment that we would have done proactively. But this has shown us that we can work differently and we can be very, very productive in that environment. So I think that will help us a lot.
So do you think that you are going to keep some of the things that you're doing right now because of this situation and try to see, for example, how, everything evolves and if you stick to those
Definitely.
things.
I think, one of the things that has been really great is, we need to use a lot more digital tooling. So in the first week, the design team came to me with a proposal to use Figma across the product and design organizations. And we implemented it in week 1 of coronavirus. And we're now considering, how do we roll that out? And I think all of those toolings, and we've moved everything, this is week 6 now. So it wasn't a short-term thing. We've had to start building functionality by using Figma between teams. And that has been really helpful. And I hope that no one goes back to relying on a whiteboard, because now we can actually all work together. Yeah.
I think that the tricky part, especially when you are, and it's happening to me, I mean, my company is like a B2B, so customers that kind of be the relationship with the customers can be a little bit different than what you have, for example, like we are in the retail space, or you are, selling products to end consumers, that they're, basically people. But for example, how did you adapt the kind of interview process? I know that you're doing a lot of discovery, continuous discovery, so that you have a lot of people that you were visiting your offices.
Yeah.
I think that part, might have changed, but could you tell us a little bit some of the things that you have, sort out in order to have more or less the same thing that you had before?
Yeah, so we use a product called User Zoom for a lot of our user research kind of digitization. I do think we were using that before, and it really scales our ability to get insights. I don't think that you can really replace talking to someone in person.
Yeah.
I understand, the desire for automation across the entire universe. Yeah. But I do think that humans have
connection.
There's something with it, and the way someone's leaning into a UI sketch, or is, the thoughts that they have that you can't see when they're filling in a survey.
Yeah.
Then they think, I see it when I'm homeschooling. I have a 6-year-old daughter, which my husband and I are attempting to co-homeschool. And I see it when she's learning, right? And she wants to submit the exercise, but she wants it to be perfect before she submits it. And I keep trying to explain that's not the point. Yesterday she spelt squishy with a SKWISH. And she said, is that spelt right? I said, do you think it's spelt right? And she said, yes, it's ish. And I was like, okay. Then, because otherwise, and this is, I think, how, this is the dynamics of user research as well. And, I have a lot of respect for user research. I am so impatient. I ask leading questions. I answer the questions. I do all the wrong things. And essentially our user research lead, Shruti, pretty much, I think, wants to gaff tape my mouth. Right. But that's important, right? And the white space to let people think about what they're going to respond to. And so that's something that if this goes for a long time, I think that will be difficult.
Yeah. That will be the most difficult thing, I believe, when you're trying to do this, replace this kind of thing that you can see in the moment. When the person is interacting with something, is something that, for example, remotely it's much more difficult to see or to perceive when you're in this kind of situation.
And I've worked in smaller companies on smaller products before, and we would do things like draw screens and then go down to the coffee shop and ask people if they knew what this was, right?
Yeah.
But and we did that because A, it was fast, but also B, you get a gut instinctive reaction from people really quickly, which you don't get in digital.
Exactly. It's much faster. And then it's true. I mean, I've seen, for example, when you're interacting with people, that when you're drawing things remotely, people tend to be more perfect. They don't like, for example, these kind of scrappy things. They have a more clear sense to try to say, I need to make this perfect, and that can be, I don't want to say controversial at some extent, but the problem is that you're not trying to apply the same lean principles that we're trying to say, hey, try to iterate, don't try to make it perfect the first time, try to, learn more about it than you want to make it perfect, or try to see, for example, where are the gaps rather than, that's completely true. I just want to go back a little bit, Georgie, when you were talking about you were talking about the strategic intent. So my question to you is, how did you make, for example, at N26, this kind of connection? There is a concept, which is called the messy middle. So when you have someone who gives a vision, and then you have the people doing the work, but you have no idea what is going on, in between. Could you shed some light on what specifically not the tools, but more or less how you're structuring to create this whole story between what the people are doing, on the trenches, and how do you connect that to the vision that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think the messy middle is the perfect analogy for it. And to be honest, I think this has been the most difficult part about growing this fast, because as a smaller company, the messy middle is kind of not as impactful, because if you all kind of know where you're going, and you know what the vision and the mission is, and you're all in the kitchen talking about it all the time, then you're so intuitively plugged into that middle part that you know what to build. And I think as an organization, we have struggled to learn how to articulate that messy middle bit. And that is what we're focused on at the moment. So especially since everyone is away, it becomes even more important. Like, it needs to be on a page. It needs to be that clear and that simple, because if you don't have that, then it doesn't matter what people's roles and responsibilities are, because they don't know where that fits. This is the hard part. I think that it needs to also be a framework within which makes sense and you can break down. So you've got this very high level vision and mission, and you need some goals. You need to know, like, the area that you're playing in, who the users are that you're talking to, what the market is like, what you are and what you aren't. And what we're trying to do at the moment is define those big, so you can call them big rocks, you can call them themes, you can call them mountains to climb. Like, what are those things over a mid-term plan that we wanted? What are those mountains that we want to climb? And be clear about what those mountains are, so that people can help you climb them. Because otherwise people are going to start climbing to the vision, and you just don't know where the like if it's going in the right direction. And it can happen really fast, and you need to make sure that you have some control over it. I think sometimes you're better at it, and then you quickly realize that you ran out of mountain, and you need to identify for the organization where the next one is. It might be in your head, and it might be in presentations that you give and things like that, but you also need to make sure that it's clear for every single person in the organization. And that's a major focus for us at the moment. We've just kind of completed an incredible journey over the last year and a half of really changing the way the app is and how people engage with it, and pushing more value out from a data perspective, from an info card perspective. We're really changing a transaction list into something that is more akin to a financial feed, right? And your life. And that's been fantastic. And we will now iterate on that and build on it, but the foundation of it is there. And so now we need to articulate what the next one is, so that we can be kind of driving things ahead. And this is constantly the challenge in, calling yourself and wanting to be and having been a pioneer organization, really pushing the boundaries every day. It doesn't just happen.
Absolutely. There is a beautiful, I mean, I took the messy middle from John Cutler. He always talks about that. And the really nice exercise that he has is when he goes into a team, he, for example, pick up any particular year that is on the backlog and try to split the different chunks of work between 1 or 3 days, 1 or 3 months, to try to see people in reality that they're doing the work. Know, for example, what you're saying, what is that messy immediately, how that connects into the vision or the mission that you were saying before. I think that it's a fantastic way to try to know whether the people are aligned with the strategy, with the mission, with the vision, with everything. So Georgie, we are up to the hour. Before we close, and also thank you so much for being with us. We normally ask, if you can share, for example, any particular thing that is interesting for you, for people who want to start jumping to the world of product management. I don't know, it could be any, for example, books, articles, blog, podcast, whatever comes to mind that people can start, to look at if they're interested to get into the world of product management.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned Melissa Perry before. I think she's fantastic. She has a really great book called The Build Trap.
Escaping the Build Trap, yeah.
Escaping the Build Trap, yeah, that's a fantastic book to read. It's got quite a good, she's done a really good job of putting something together that's readable and that has, a story, has some story to it, but also is very practical. And has some very clear things laid out, which are very common sense, which I really like. I also am reading a book at the moment. Perhaps I can get the name of it. I can't remember what the name is. It's by an ex-Navy captain. And he originally wrote the book, Turn the Ship Around. And this is his new book. Andreas, I will get the name of the book.
David Marquette, but I think leaders words or something like that. I think that we'll get the name. We'll get the name of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. But that was fantastic and really very important to understand what leadership is about and the different types of leadership that you can have. There's command and control leadership, which has been highly successful for a very long period of time. But with Toyota and things started to change, and obviously the Agile manifesto came up with the Toyota Carter, and ING did a lot of work around it as well. And you just need to understand it as well. They're tools that you can think, okay, how I say things matter, and listening to the answer matters, and what can I learn? So I think that those are both really good.
Nice, perfect. All right, Georgie, thank you again. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll be publishing this into the YouTube channel. I don't know if you want to say any last word to the people, or any particular announcement that you want to say, whatever.
No, I mean, I think I gave a talk at a university recently, and they were all people who are incredibly passionate, wanted to build things, wanted to drive things forward. And I think lose the fear. Or don't lose it. It's always going to be there. I have it. Everyone has it. If you want to do great things, it's always going to be scary. There's always going to be a risk. Just start, right? And take that first step. The first step is always the hardest. It's always the scariest. And after that, things start to roll. So if you don't know, if you want to do something, if you want to go into product, if you want to start building something, if you want to start your own company, just work out what the first step is. It's always the hardest, but I think, as I say to my daughter when she doesn't want to jump off the bench, yes, it's scary. Do it anyway.
That's very good advice. I'm going to give you the confidence to either to move forward or to revisit what you did.
Or you'll learn and change.
Fantastic. Georgie, again, thank you so much. Have a very nice day. Thank you for being with us and spending this hour with us.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, guys.